What's crack-a-lacking, y'all? My name's Dr. Oriafa, and I am a first-year ophthalmology resident in New York City, currently completing an internal medicine intern year. It is September, y'all. Residency application season is now among us. The ophthalmology and urology applicants have already started submitting their applications. However, the people doing the ERAS application for most specialties are getting ready to submit this month. So I just wanted to share some wisdom regarding what to even look for in a residency program. People spend so much time trying to figure out how to get residency programs to want them. Oh, how is this program going to interview me? How am I going to be a good applicant? However, people don't spend enough time reflecting on what they even want to get out of a residency program. So it's very important that you take the time to reflect on what your priorities are as you're doing your applications, deciding where to signal, and as you ultimately go on the interview trail and create your rank list. So let's get into it. The overarching thing that I want you all to take away from this is put yourself in your resident self's shoes. Put yourself in resident Oriafa's shoes, in resident Jessica's shoes, whatever your name is, Chukwu, Emeka, whoever you are. Remember that as a resident, your first and foremost goal is to become competent and confident in whatever craft of medicine you've chosen for yourself, or that the algorithm has chosen for you. You want to become skilled and proficient, and you want to be able to care for patients independently. That is goal number one. But at the same time, you also want to ensure that you put yourself in a place where your resident self will grow, thrive, and blossom. So as you're listening to me talk, bear those things in mind as the basic prerequisites. And how do we even know how you're going to find the best place for you to thrive? I'm going to give you guys now a list of the main things to consider. Specifically, I'm going to touch on your overall wellness and lifestyle, the format of your training, being able to reach your career goals, as well as other things to consider. So first category, things that contribute to your overall lifestyle and wellness. The number one thing to consider is location. This is something I didn't prioritize as much at first. Specifically, me who went into a competitive specialty like ophthalmology, I just wanted to get in, period. I just wanted to match. And to an extent, that's still true, but when you're creating your rank list and choosing where to apply, location is an important thing to prioritize. And this didn't really hit me until the weeks leading up to submitting my rank list, because location plays a huge role in your overall well-being. Specifically, where does your family live? Are you going to be able to visit your family easily? Is it going to cause you to have to pay so much extra in plane tickets, train rides, so on and so forth? Speaking from somebody who's now in the thick of residency, there have been times where things were very tough for me. Being able to go home to Maryland, I'm currently in New York, so Maryland is just like 3 hours away, has really been instrumental in my overall ability to recharge and recenter myself. And my family came to visit me as well. So even though I'm not in my home city, I'm glad I got to get out of Maryland and explore a new place. But I'm actually very thankful to be in a situation where I can see my family if I wanted to, which is not the case if I were to have moved to California, for example. Support system is very important. So location is something that can play into that. Another reason location is important is because you want to be somewhere that you're suited to. Certain areas in the country may give you better opportunities to have a life outside of medicine. What are your hobbies? Does the location that residency program is in offer you the ability to engage in those things? Is there a lot to do in whatever city you'll be in? If you like, I don't know, skiing, are you going somewhere cool that'll offer you the ability to engage in that hobby? Because all these things help you to be a whole person and not just get bogged down in the chaos of residency. And it gives you an outlet to explore other things, which it also contributes to your wellness. I wouldn't say it's something that'll make or break whether or not I apply to a program or not, but it's something to consider. Another thing that'll contribute to your overall lifestyle as a resident is the salary. And salary is something not enough people like to talk about because it's almost taboo in a way. If you're not in medicine, you might not know that residents don't get paid that much. I know people hear, oh my gosh, you're a doctor, you must be so rich. That's not the case for residents who are still in training. The average salary of a medical resident is somewhere in around $60,000 to $70,000 a year, which is above the national average, but you're not balling by any means. However, you also need to consider the salary in proportion to the cost of living for whatever area that is. Making $70,000 in Idaho is not going to be the same $70,000 you're making living in Miami. You'll probably have a better quality of life with that $70K in Idaho because you can afford rent. You can afford food. You want to consider, does the salary that residents there get match the cost of living of that city? Otherwise, you can find yourself in a situation where you are dead broke. This is also important to consider if you're a resident who happens to have children or a family. Are you going to be able to sustain yourself with the salary and live a good quality of life in that city where the program is located? I'm actually very glad that the program that I'm currently at pays significantly more than the average residency salary, but that's because we're in New York City. New York City, especially Manhattan, is a very high cost of living area. So I'm really glad that the salary is able to offset the cost of living. Again, not something that should make or break whether you apply somewhere, but you really need to think about your resident self and the life that they're going to be living. Residency is hard enough. You don't want to also be severely struggling financially. Another thing that contributes to your overall lifestyle and wellness in a residency program is the culture of that program. And this is for both the residents and the faculty and how they interact with each other. And I know it can be a bit hard to pick up on these things when we're doing virtual interviews in 2025, but you need to be very observant even during those virtual settings. Try and pay attention to how do the residents interact with the attendings. Is it a respectful tone? Is it a little bit more old school? Is it an uplifting environment? What kind of personalities are in that program? And also part of being observant is looking at the residents. Look into their eyes even during the Zoom call and listen to how they speak. Try and figure out, are these people happy where they are? Or are they seeming burnt out? Are they super duper tired? Of course, being tired in residency is normal to an extent, but if everybody seems like they're on the brink of a mental health crisis, that's a problem. Of course, a couple people struggling here and there makes sense, but do people generally speaking seem to be happy? Do people seem to be kind to one another? Are you able to crack a joke? Are people smiling? Are they frowning? It's very important to pick up on the overall energy and vibe of the place because you're trying to figure out if you're going to be able to integrate yourself into that culture. Do you see yourself being able to be part of that community at that program? And something else that ties into this is, do the residents hang out with each other if that's something that's important to you? Are the residents friends or are they more just colleagues? Especially if you're moving somewhere where you might not already have a lot of friends, it's good to know that you'll be able to build strong relationships with your co-residents if that's something that's important to you. That's something that I considered pretty heavily actually, and I'm glad I did because now I'm building much closer relationships with my co-residents. We actually just hung out like 2 days ago and the prior week. Being able to start making genuine friendships, especially now that I've moved to a new city, has been a great part of my experience so far. And another thing to consider with that is the diversity of the program. If you're a woman, you might want to not be the first woman there, you know? Of course, you can be a trailblazer, but looking at some of the demographics in a certain program could sometimes reflect what they value. Is it all male? Is it all white people? Not to say that this should make or break whether you apply somewhere. It definitely should not. And sometimes things can just simply be due to chance, but you of course want to be somewhere where you'll be comfortable and have people you can connect with. So it's just another point to consider. And the last thing that contributes to your overall lifestyle / wellness is the call schedule and the call format. So if you didn't know already, Residents have to take call quite often because you can't just have nobody in the hospital who knows anything about a certain specialty at one given time. Because what if an emergency walks in? However, different residency programs have different formats regarding the call. There are some residency programs that do 24-hour shifts. However, some other programs do more of a day shift night float system. And the program that I'm at actually does night float. Both the internal medicine department and the ophthalmology people have recently implemented night float. And this is something that's important to consider because it affects how much sleep you get. And we all know that sleep is a great contributor to your overall health and well-being. So thinking about how many hours you're going to have to work in one go. For me, the most so far I've had to work is about 14 hours, which to me is hard but doable. However, I think there's actually data saying that once you get to the 24-hour range of being awake, you're basically at the same level of someone who is drunk, which could be dangerous for patient care, but that's just my own opinion. So these things and losing sleep can stack up over time very slowly. Generally speaking, if you had to choose between somewhere where you don't have to do 24-hour calls versus you do, personally, I would choose somewhere where you have the night float system and don't do 24-hour shifts. However, in some cases, some people might prefer the 24-hour shifts because you get to have more continuity with whatever patients you're working with. And medical errors can also happen during like handoffs and transitions between teams. So some people might prefer the 24-hour shifts and then having a post-call day off the following day. So it's just something to consider what you would prefer. But I think most people generally tend to prefer having a night float system. But of course, this isn't possible everywhere. And something else that might be a little bit more ophthalmology specific is, in addition to having 24-hour shifts versus having a night float system, is also considering whether you're doing in-house call or home call. With in-house call, usually you're in the hospital for that 24 hours, and then at the end of the 24 hours, let's say at 7 a.m. the next day, you get the rest of that day off. However, with home call, after maybe at 5 p.m. you get to go home. However, you can get called in at any time throughout the night and you still have to work the next day. If it is a situation where the program has home call, you also want to consider, does the program have policies regarding being able to rest when needed? Because let's say you're doing home call, but you are basically getting slammed with pages and basically have to stay up the entire night. It might not be so safe for you to work the next day, because now we're getting into the range of working for 36 hours straight, which is a possibility. So you want to know, does your program have a fatigue policy? Are they going to allow you to go home if you feel like it's not safe for you to take care of patients in that moment? Overall, I believe patient safety should be a priority, but also being able to take care of yourself and show up to work the best version of yourself well rested. So those are the things that you need to consider regarding overall lifestyle. I'm now going to move on to regarding the format of your training. Like I said in the beginning of this video, number one goal is to come out of your residency training being confident and competent and able to take care of patients independently. So you want to be able to know how to assess whether or not your program is going to be able to help you achieve that goal. And if they are ACGME accredited, they should allegedly be able to do so, but of course some are better than others. Think about how robust the training is going to be at that program. What is the volume of patients that they see? Are you going to be able to see enough patients to get in enough repetition and learn enough to be able to take that training and go out into the world? And this is especially true and important for surgical subspecialties, for surgical specialties rather. You don't want your resident self to find themselves in a situation where they're barely able to meet the requirements to graduate residency on time. They're struggling to meet the ACGME requirements. For example, in ophthalmology, one thing that we really need to be able to do well by the end is cataract surgery. It's actually the most common surgery out of every procedure done in the United States. I believe the ACGME requires us to have completed 86 cataract surgeries by the end of training, but the average is about 230. You'd rather find yourself at a program where you get more practice and opportunities with with that than less. So you'd rather be somewhere that has more volume of these and residents are able to get more practice in. And also it's important to assess the accuracy of those surgical numbers because sometimes they can be inflated. Let's say a resident is logging surgeries that they may have assisted with or may have observed, but they didn't actually complete themselves as the primary surgeon. You want to try and be able to gauge how much of the surgeries residents are actually able to do, because you do not want to find your attending self in a position where you don't know what you're doing. You want to be able to get in enough practice to be able to have your own private practice if you wanted. And another way sometimes to gauge the confidence of residents coming out of a certain program, this might be a bit more ophthalmology specific, but looking at the ratio of people who go into comprehensive ophthalmology or versus people who go into fellowship. And you can apply this to other specialties. For specialties where you don't necessarily need to complete a fellowship after, are people choosing to not complete a fellowship after? Because sometimes people doing a fellowship could be because they didn't feel their residency training was adequate. And remember, y'all, residency is not supposed to be an easy experience. It's supposed to be a pressure cooker, a difficult pressure cooker to take you from somebody who has an understanding of medicine to somebody who is an expert in that very specific field and can practice independently. So you don't want to be at a program where you're not busy or you're not seeing enough patients to become an expert. The other thing regarding the format of training that you want to consider is thinking about your own learning style and how that program matches your learning style. Things to consider regarding that include autonomy. Are you going to be at a program that is a bit more hand-holdy and they might give you more coaching? The attendings might work with you more closely and do a little bit more of driving the management plan, versus do you want to be at a program that's a little bit more autonomy based where you get to be the one making the decisions? And I will say both of these can have their pros and cons, but it really depends on your own personal learning style. Neither is inherently better than the other, I think. Personally, I wanted to be somewhere that had a good balance of the two, where I am actually getting taught things correctly the first go round, or I actually get to have a lecture or didactic or be trained in how to do a certain thing, especially when I'm starting out with the safety net of somebody who's more knowledgeable. But also having autonomy is good as well, because it'll help you to rapidly develop your confidence and your ability to work independently at the end of all of this. And just so you know, programs that are autonomy based should also still have that safety net of a more knowledgeable physician to help you. You should still be able to reach out to an attending in a situation where you feel like you're struggling. So there shouldn't be a situation, especially like as an intern, where you can't even call somebody if needed, but you do want to be put in situations where you're required to push yourself to become that independent thinker. So whether you want more of a coaching system or more of an autonomous system really does boil down to your own personality, but it's something to think about. Another thing to consider with your learning style is how does the program teach that specialty? Are there a lot of sit-down didactics or lectures? Do they have simulations where you get to maybe work with mannequins or work on a simulating robot, whatever the frick, to practice? Do they have regular quizzes or tests to help you stay on top of a certain learning plan? Is your ability to learn and study a bit more flexible, or is it more rigid? Does the program offer dedicated time, maybe if it's once a month, twice a month, where you get to work on just studying? Do you want to have didactics every morning? Do you want to have a long didactic day every other week? Different programs do things differently, so as you go along the interview trail and start hearing how different programs do things, try and see what best suits you. So yeah, it's very important to consider the overall training and education that you'll get from that program, and also thinking about how the residents at your program perform on whatever boards or in-house exams that are administered throughout the residency. What is the board pass rate at the end of it all? Because that could reflect whether education is really invested in that program, or is the program more so just for you to get as much work done as possible. possible? Do you get time to really digest things and study and fine-tune your knowledge? Or are you just learning the bread and butter of your specialty through repeated exposure? Of course, it should be a balance of these two things, but it's important to consider both the clinical volume as well as how the residents are able to perform when it comes time to get certified in the specialty. Another large section to consider is how is that program going to invest in you to be able to reach your own personal and career goals? In other words, how does this program nourish your passions? I, for example, am pretty passionate about community service, and I also want to engage in global ophthalmology when I'm an attending. So of course, I'm looking for programs that have opportunities for residents to engage in community service and potentially go on global ophthalmology trips so I can get some exposure to that before I go out into my career. Other people might be very interested in research or academics, education, and there are even programs that have tracks or pathways for you to learn more about whatever niche you want to find yourself in. And also considering, let's say your program doesn't already have opportunities for that, do they have a history of being open to residents pioneering those things? And also considering who's already at the program as far as attendings. Are there people you could potentially connect with who are already doing whatever you're interested in? If so, that could be an avenue for you to lay the foundations for your future career goals as well. And another thing is thinking about fellowships as well as whatever the next steps are in your head. If you're going into residency and you already have a very strong idea of what fellowship you want to do, let's say you're an internal medicine resident really hoping to do cardiology, you would want to make sure that the program that you're going to has a history of matching people into cardiology, or that program has a cardiology fellowship themselves. So having a home program can hopefully increase your chances of matching. And also how much exposure to whatever subspecialty you're interested in are you going to get in that program? Do you have opportunities to take electives in cardiology, for example? And another thing to consider is the program reputation. A program with a good reputation is more likely to match people into certain fellowships, or residents graduating from there are going to have an easier time getting certain jobs. So also thinking about your next steps after residency and what avenues you'll be able to pursue, and whether your residency program is going to make that easier for you to get into or more difficult. And if you're someone like me, for example, who's not so sure what they want to do after, you want to be at a program that provides opportunities for multiple things, whether that be going straight into practice after residency or having adequate exposure in multiple subspecialties of whatever specialty you're doing to the point where you can successfully match in a variety of things. And lastly, I wanted to real quick share other things that you can consider. These shouldn't necessarily make or break whether or not you apply to somewhere or rank them, but it's something to think about. Firstly, thinking about other little perks that the program might have that can make your life a little bit easier, or anything that the program might pay for. For example, is there an educational stipend at the program? Are they going to pay for you to take step 3? Are they going to pay for equipment that you might need? Are they going to pay for UWorld? If not, it's okay, but when you're already not that rich as a resident, it'll be great to not have to spend that $600 here and there when you can spend it on groceries instead. You can also consider, like, do they give a meal card for you to eat in the cafeteria? Do they have a resident lounge or somewhere for you to document peacefully? Another thing to consider are the different locations you'll work at. And what I mean by that is, are you going to mainly be at one hospital? Are you going to work at a VA? Or are you going to be commuting between multiple different sites? And if so, do they have any support regarding transportation? And your need to commute is something to also think about, because commuting is something that takes time out of your day. As a resident, you only have so many hours in the day, so things might be easier on you if you only have to go to a couple different sites. But also, some programs can give you opportunities to work in another state for a period of time. That can expose you to a whole nother hospital system, a whole nother area for you to explore, which could be fun. But if you have a family, for example, you might be a little bit less inclined to have to up and live in another city during your residency program for a couple months. So that's something to think about as well, and that really depends on your preference. And the last other thing to consider is the patient population that you'll be working with. Do you want to work with an underserved underserved population or a certain demographic? Do you want to serve the community that you grew up in? So on and so forth. But at the end of the day, serving patients is serving patients, and the exact population you work with, what shouldn't necessarily stop you from getting a good education. But having a diverse population could also be helpful because you might get to see a broader variety of pathology. So those are all of the main things to consider regarding choosing a residency program. And I highly suggest that as you go through the application season, the interview trail, keep track of these things, and especially keep track of your gut feelings and impressions of the program after you interview. This will help you a lot when you're making your rank list. Personally, I made a Google Sheet. I took a lot of notes when I went throughout my interviews, and I will actually link my template that I used during the interview trail to keep track of different data regarding certain programs, my impressions, and so on and so forth. So you can find that link in the description. It's completely free. And I wanted to also say to remember that you'll be okay no matter where you go. A lot of the doctor that you're going to become is dependent on who you choose to be every day. How do you utilize whatever opportunities you are given? How much do you practice to hone your skills? How much do you work to be a better version of yourself daily? So even if you may not end up exactly where your top preference was, stay focused on the impact that you're having on patients on the day-to-day, and stay focused on becoming the best doctor that you can be, no matter what card life deals you with the match system. So I hope this video was helpful and gave you a better idea of what to look for regarding residencies. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, drop a comment down below, and remember to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Adios.